Hi, welcome to Chapter and Verse. Today I'm going to have a conversation with mega best-selling author Catherine Coulter, who's had 80 some odd books on the New York Times bestseller list. And we'll be talking about the stories behind her books, her career, tips on writing and the writing process. And
hi, Rick. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. I've looked through some things about your life, and one of the things that I noticed, which seems to be a common thread with you, and I've also interviewed PC Cast and Rex Pickett, and what seems to be a common thread is you all started writing at an early age. Can you talk about when and how you started writing?
Well, when I was very young, I was in love with Little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza.
Okay.
So I wrote a book about Little Joe Cartwright, and it was all of 13 pages. So it suffered from what we call the moving right along syndrome. But that was the first thing. And I'm sure, as you're discovering, and probably true of yourself too, is that all through school, writing, everybody has a talent. Everybody, but I didn't even think about it. Writing was very easy, so I could write a paper the night before and get an A+, and everybody hated my guts, and I was like, that's just what I could do. But I never considered writing professionally. And I wrote. I'm sure. Did you do this? Did you write poetry in college?
No, actually, I wrote plays in college.
Well, you're 3 acts. I was only one. But I became a speech writer on Wall Street because my husband was at Columbia Presbyterian Medical School in New York City. And just at that point, I'd see him maybe 30 minutes a night over dinner. And I was reading probably 15 books a week, and then again, so many authors have started like this. I threw the book across the room and said, I can do better. And I told my husband, and he said, let's go for it.
Wow, that's support.
I hear horror stories about non-support, actively non-support, but oh, no. He knew there was no problem. And so the very first book, it took me about a year to do it because, I was working full time and it was a brand new endeavor. But at least I was smart enough. The person I loved, her writing is Georgia Hare. She's an English author. She created the Regency romance. And my master's degree is in early 19th century English history. So that's the Regency period. So I realized in this dim corner of my brain that you really want to limit the unknowns if you're doing something totally new. So I knew the period, I knew how to write Regency, and I knew what was going on politically. And so all I had to worry about was the story. And I was very lucky. There are maybe 2 or 3 reasons why publishers buy an author, a new author. And that is, one, they just love the book. But the second reason is they're in deep caca because authors haven't turned in their manuscripts and they've got to have a book. So I think I was probably the second. But
really modest.
You never know. You never know. I've been very lucky, So that I didn't mean to get all the way. Boy, talk about getting off the rails there. So that's kind of a boiled down version of when I wrote when I was young.
But so that first book that you wrote, that was Autumn Countess, is that?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm not mistaken, if I recall correctly, you actually personally sent that to a publisher and they picked it up and offered you a multi-book deal. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So is that a different era than today? I mean, can people, do you think, still do that today, or do you really need to have an agent to get a publisher to pay attention?
The latter. I think today you really need an agent because we're from 7 big houses down to now like 3 or 4. And there are so many people, you know, there are like 5 or 6 million books published a year now because everybody self-publishes.
I know.
So, and most of it is not in publishable form, as you know, but it's an opportunity for everybody to have fun and get out there, which I applaud. But I think today the best way to go is, first of all, try to get an agent. Finish a manuscript if you're a first-time writer. Never, never try to sell it on 2 chapters because they have no idea. You could be a clown. You know, they have no idea.
Right.
You could be an idiot.
Right.
So you have to finish your book. You have to make that sucker grammatically perfect, because, and if you don't grab the, and I've had, well, I have a lot of editor friends. If you don't grab the editor by the throat in 5 pages, hang it up.
Right.
So that behooves you not to start with the, you know, the meadows were so pretty in the spring and the light, you know, all this stuff. You've got to really grab, and you've got to grab the reader too. And so what were we talking about?
You're talking about submitting directly to publishers.
Yeah. So you want to try to get an agent first with the most perfect book you can possibly hand them. And then the agent will either accept it or reject it. If the agent rejects it, then you can always go to, for example, if you're writing a Regency romance. If you're writing a Regency romance, you will go to the closest bookstore to you, if you have one, and you go to the Regency romance section and see who the best publishers are.
Right.
And then you would find out, you would call up and ask who edited blah blah's book. And then you would send it personally to that editor.
That's
and
great.
Then see what happens. All they can do is say no. They can't cut off your toes. You know, all they have to do is say no.
You know,
but that's the way to do it.
It's interesting that you say that, because I interact on social media with a number of aspiring authors, and many of them seem to have this fear of rejection, that, you know, that they just take it totally personally. And I keep saying to them, you have to have a thick skin. You just have to realize you're going to get rejected. Harry Potter got rejected. I mean, Stephen King got rejected. You know, you didn't, you were lucky, but many hit authors have, and it comes with the territory.
Well, of course, it's like if you're a violin player and the Georgia Symphony decides they don't want you. Well, are you going to go kill yourself? No, you go to another symphony and you audition again. I mean, it's true all across life. It's who cares? You just can't be disappointed for 5 minutes, drink a beer, and move on.
Exactly.
It's not a question of thick skin. It's a question of a functioning brain.
Yeah. So,
and an attitude that I'm going to make it. And if I don't, I'm going to make it. And so, of course, I'm going to get refused. Not everybody's going to love me. And so they're idiots. But, you know, you move on. So don't tell them thick skin, really, because it's not a question of that. It might be a question of that when it comes to critics.
okay.
And there's a very easy way to deal with that. I simply tell the publisher, I do not want to see any review that's negative. Forget it. I don't want to see them. I don't want that in my world. And that's all you have to do. I never see them.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is great. It really is. It's very healthy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're in the real world. Deal with it.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
So you got the deal without an agent. When and did you get an agent, and how did you choose an agent?
Well, that's quite interesting. Actually, I've never had somebody ask me that before. Good question. Well, when the contract was coming up, I knew nothing. And New York Publishing was this huge, vast, mysterious machine. And so I asked my editor, and so she gave me the name of one of her best friends who was an agent. Let me just say, I could have negotiated a better contract. So then what happened is at that time, the Authors Guild, the secretary was Peter Heggie, and he's Hungarian, and my husband's Hungarian.
Okay.
And that's the only reason. So I called him up, introduced myself, and he knew who I was. I don't know how. I mean, come on, I was like nobody. But I said, I want a woman agent. Okay. So he gave me 2 women agents and a male agent. So
Okay.
I tripped, meanwhile, we had moved to San Francisco. So I tripped back to New York. And to be honest, I do not remember the name of the two women.
Okay.
It's true. I went to William Morris. I got shown to this little closet of a cubicle, and it was Robert Gottlieb. And he was 6 months out of the mail room, and that's MALE room. And in fact, William Morris still runs things like that, the idiots.
Really?
But so he was very, very hungry. And I found, and I asked him, I said, what are your goals? And he said, I want to be on the board of directors by the time I'm 40. And I said, let's do it. And he called me up, and this was in 1987. He called me up, and he was just hyperventilating. He was on the board of directors at age 36.
Wow.
So I've been with him through all of his marriages. I get great gifts. I've been all the kids, great gifts. And we've been together since 1981. So we are an old married couple, you know.
I've interacted with Robert, and I like him a lot, and also his son Mark, who I deal with quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, Robert, you know, he left William Morris because he got out-sharked by Michael Ovitz.
Oh, really?
And it's the smartest thing he ever did in his life, because he created Trident Media Group.
Yeah.
And I remember he created it in 2001 because we were all in Hawaii together on Maui Writers Conference, and I was speaking. And he said, you got any problem with that? I said, let's go for it. And he's so rich now, he doesn't know what to do with all his money. I mean, oh, I think he bought St. Martin's. I'm not sure, but he was part of it. But I've been given Robert, I've been very, very lucky.
Yeah.
Very lucky, because he has clout and power.
Oh, yeah.
And the problem is I keep forgetting to use him because he's my hammer, you know. But over the years, I get to know everybody, and I forget when I have a problem, he's there to deal with it. And then I think it was a couple of years ago, I knew something was happening at Simon & Schuster. You know, bad things were happening. My editor was fired. She was the biggest editor they had.
Wow.
And I said, right. And he said, I agree with you. And he says, we're leaving. And so he dealt with what was going to happen when my editor left, because they fired her, you know. And then they also fired Louise Burke, because she was the scapegoat for another one of their freaking scandals. You know, she was the scapegoat. She's I've known her since the early 90s. Have you ever met her?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you would really like her. She's, talk about down to earth, you know. I mean, she's like, kick back and have a beer. But so he was the hammer. He said, this is going to happen. This is what you're going to do now. This is what you're going to do about this and this. And then he just, and he has the power to, they know if they try to screw up, he's going to stop sending them good people, you know. So I've been very, very lucky. And he's a pistol.
Oh, yeah. So no regrets whatsoever that you didn't end up with a female agent.
The fact that I don't remember their names should tell you that. No regrets.
So I know you've written a series with J.T. Ellison.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, the FBI, I've written the FBI series, and I was wondering if you could tell me how you shared the writing duties. Who wrote what, or how did you figure out who was going to write what? I always am interested in collaborative efforts.
Well, there are a whole lot. And let me just start off by saying 95% of them end in disaster. They end in vitriol and bitterness and anger and rage. And I'm going to freaking kill you. So it usually does not work. However, what happened is into my mind came this full cast of characters. Nicholas Drummond, his father, his mother was a comedian in the 80s. I knew the name of the butler. I knew everything, but I knew I could not write 2 big thrillers a year. I couldn't do it. So I said, what to do? And I said, well, all other authors write with people. So I called Clive Cussler, and I missed him terribly. Anyway.
I loved him as an author. I truly loved his writing.
Well, he was a hoot. I mean, Dirk Pitt was a hoot. I mean, he was such a sexist. It was just hysterical. Anyway, let's not go there. So anyway, I told him what I wanted to do, and I said, "Tell me how you deal with it." And he says, "Well," he says, "I'm not cheap like Jimmy." This is, and he gave me his protocol. And one of the things he told me was, he said, it's an author for hire. Okay.
Right.
That's what it is. It's collaborative, but it's not a partnership. It's author for hire. He said, you are always the boss, and it has to be that we have to drive the bus.
Okay.
And he was perfectly right. And so then it was so funny because Gottlieb said, I told him what I was doing. He was thrilled out of his mind because he loves the art of the deal, you know. He just loved the thought of that. And so then he tells me with a straight face, he said, well, Catherine, we have so many great authors here. I'm sure one of them will be perfect for your needs. And I was going, oh, come on, go away. You know, you're just pushing me. I go away. So anyway, I talked to, you know, mystery store owners like Barbara across the country, friends and everything, because I wanted somebody published. And so my husband took 20 suspense thrillers or mysteries. I did 20, and both of us independently picked JT.
Oh, wow.
Never heard of her, never heard of her, never read her. Her style is far away from my style. She calls herself an introspective navel gazer. Well, I'm the big mouth, dialogue driven person. So our styles were utterly different, but there was just something. There was something. It also is a big plus, and I hope people who are considering this will take this into deep consideration, given how polarized we are politically now, that you want to have someone that will be in your life 24/7. Okay, we're talking Zoom, we're talking emails, we're phone calls. Get somebody who is politically compatible with you. Otherwise, you're sunk before you start. You are because that person will say something unconsciously and your back will go up and you'll like pull out your gun and kill them or something. Anyway, so I very strongly recommend that. JT and I are totally together on that. We both love cats. We have so much in common, and yet she's so different. Her career was so different and continues to be different from mine. But we hit it off immediately. And what we did, I'm a pantser. Have you ever heard that word?
I have heard that word, yes.
If you write by the seat of your pants, in other words, you do not outline like a plotzer does.
Right.
Well, she's the same way. But we knew we could not operate like that because we're like this now. So we sat between us, and that very first book, The Final Cut, we outlined chapter 1 to 92.
Oh.
We
Whoa.
couldn't believe we did it. We went out and got drunk. I mean, we just couldn't believe we did it. And so there have been 6 books in the series. And then I pulled the plug on it because I really thought it had run its course. And, you know, they were always getting in, well, you don't necessarily know this, but they were international, and they were always getting in deep, deep trouble. And the villains were great. They tried to kill him in so many myriad ways, and we couldn't think of any more ways to kill him. But we cut it off with the astronaut, the insane astronaut, you know, with The Last Second, which was just a blazing book. And they're also much longer than my FBI. They're probably about 15,000 words longer usually.
Oh, wow.
But JT she read all of my FBI. She studied them, and she really wrote in my style. The only thing she could not do, which really nobody can, and that is do the same dialogue, because I'm kind of, if I have a rep, it's for the dialogue. It's funny and it's very flowy, you know, like run on sentences and all that kind of stuff. So I did most of the dialogue. Fine. And if there was something I didn't like, then it was my decision to have it changed. You know, again, you have to be one, there has to be a bus driver here.
Yes.
And, we did very, very well together. We're friends. We email every day. So, you know, she's still very much a part of my life, and I miss her. I miss her because she's in Nashville, you know. So that's the story of Nicholas Drummond, whom I just absolutely adore. Oh,
So now you had said a little earlier when we were talking here that, if I recall correctly, that it's hard to write 2 full suspense thrillers a year. So you write what, a historical romance and a suspense thriller each year, one of each? Is that what?
well, I used to, but you know, I'm getting more along the line where I want to stop and smell the roses a little bit. And so I didn't want to do 2 books a year. And of course, the publishers want the FBI thrillers because these are the gender neutral books that sell better.
Right.
So what I started doing was writing a historical romance novella based upon a character that was in the most popular Sherbrooke series. So you guys are bringing that out in January.
Yeah.
And it's the first 5. And so that's basically, I get my taste. It was, I had to have it because when you write the same genre, I think, at least for me, and you write like over and over, I needed to break it up with something a genre that was totally disparate.
Right.
And it like gets your brain unconstipated. And so I use the novellas for that now. And they're only about 22,000 words.
Okay. And did you find it easier writing historical romance or writing thriller, or were they pretty much the same in terms of just the ease of writing them?
The ease of writing them, I mean, writing any book, I don't care what you're writing, fiction, you know, it's all hard. If it's 65,000 words or 110,000 words, it's still a plot, it's still a world, it's still characters, the whole thing. You know, it's interesting because the suspense thrillers have certain rules to them or things that you find work. For example, you want to, whenever possible, end a chapter on a cliffhanger. I like to keep my chapters short, and so it's boom, 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 this kind of thing. And I can't go screwing around with the reader. I can't take them off to Paris for the weekend.
Right.
Whereas in a historical romance, if I want to go to the cat races down in Eastbourne, let's go to the cat races and have a wonderful time. There are no constraints in terms of pacing. And pacing, of course, is the key in a suspense thriller. It's not in a historical romance. The historical romance is really, really character driven, which is wonderful. And that aids in the character driven FBI as well. But again, you have the pacing, you have all these little nitpicky details that you have to try to remember to tie up at the end. So there are things in both that kind of drive you crazy sometimes. But again, they're so different that it's wonderful to do both.
Well, that's great. I excuse my ignorance on this, but
you're asking great questions that I don't ever get. This is wonderful.
Oh, thank you. And I don't know the answer to this. Have any or many of your books been made into movies?
No, none of them.
Why?
No. That's a very good question, because I think in particular the Brittany FBI series would be incredible action movies, but no, I had you get option,
right,
and you get over that really fast. You get, you know, I even had a producer fly here from London to have lunch with me, and they even had the money backer. They were going to do 13-week series on TV, and they were going to do chapter by chapter of the first book, and I was orgasmic. I was so happy. And then it all fell apart. All fell apart.
Wow.
So even if you get, do you know what a green light is?
Yes. Yeah, that's
okay.
Go ahead to go to script writing and casting and things like that.
That's true. Even if it gets green lighted, you got like 1 in 1,000 chance of it going on.
Wow.
Unless there's a huge love affair going on, or another reason for a love affair going on between the biggest voice at a studio, and that makes a difference. But no, I haven't, and it's depressing. Except, you know, when they did Janet Ivanovich's first Plum book,
yeah,
it was dreadful. It was horrible. I mean, So you don't. I'd rather have TV series, really.
Yeah.
And you wonder, why don't they just take a book and go through it? I think they're doing that with a Stephen King now, which is very, very smart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then they don't have to worry about anything. Yeah. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. So
I'm running off at the mouth.
no. That's okay. I love it. Where do your inspirations come from? I mean, for any one of your series, did it just pop in your head, or did you read something and say, I mean, obviously I know with the very first one and with Georgette, you know, there was a background there, but for the other books that really weren't Regency oriented, how did you just pop in ideas, or how did you start? Where did it come from?
Well, when I started, you know, when I was really young, um, I would just have whole plots running through my brain. And I remember an editor saying, well, I was going to write a Regency trilogy. And I said, which one would you like first? Because I knew yeah, you know, and that hasn't happened in 20 years. I usually use a what if idea. I'm lucky to have a what if idea. For example, in the third book in the FBI series, The Target, what came to me was, okay, we have this guy. I don't know who he is. I don't know why he's there. I don't know anything about him, but he's in a cottage in the Rockies in Colorado, and he's by himself. He wants to get away from everything. And one day he finds a little girl in the forest, sexually and physically abused. What happens? What happens? And then I just go from there, and then things start coming, you know, then the characters move things forward. Yeah. But I haven't had a plot in ages.
Really?
Yeah, just an idea, like in Vortex, the book that's out today.
Yay! All right.
I just knew that I wanted a CIA operative, and her name is Olivia Hildebrand, and she leads a team into Iran to exfiltrate a undercover spy. And what happens? And she's wonderful. And it was so cute because, you know, I know the person to know at the FBI to tell me to set up who to talk to whenever I need help. Right. And so she even set me up with the appropriate person at the CIA. And so I asked him all these questions, and he was very nice. And I said, I'm really sorry about this, but I got to really shit on you. And he started laughing. He says, oh, we're used to it. But I didn't do bad things higher up, you know, so it was okay. I didn't want to totally demoralize them, but Olivia was really a cool person. And in terms of the other plot with Mia Briscoe, who tries to find out, who tries to prove who killed her friend 7 years before. She's an investigative reporter in New York City, and she's assigned a mayoral candidate, a blue blood from Boston, basically. And the way that one started was her dead friend, who was 21 at the time. They had gone to a rave together, a frat rave. Okay. And she was roofied. And and then what happens is she dies, but nobody knows it. They just have to assume. Then they set a fire to cover it up, and then there's no Serena. And so then it goes from there. You know, it was an accident, but I'm sorry you killed her because you roofied her and you were going to rape, blah, blah, blah. And Serena Reynolds was her name, and she just came to me in the middle of the night. She said, it's about me, okay? It's about me. Oh, cool. And wow, mama, yes, yes. And then it just grew up around there, you know, because I had to, writing the beginning of that, you know, was 7 years ago. And it was very, very moving for me personally, because, you know, I had the character right there in front of me. But I hope that people like Vortex. It was a bear to write, actually. It was a real bear.
Why was it a bear to write? What was it that made it that?
There were plot complications that kept creeping up that each had to be solved, and it could not impinge upon something else. Right. And if you have a fairly intricate plot, and I do 2 plots in a book, you know, sometimes they dovetail, and this they don't. so you have all of these things going on, and then something changes here. So you have to go back to make everything consistent. Or you have to, well, no, I didn't even think about that. And I should have, oh, they should have thought about this on page 43, not 200. Yeah. So it's always juggling around. And of course, you don't do that in a historical romance. This constant juggling because of so many little itty bitty threads that have to be done perfectly. And I'm very lucky because my husband is my editor. He's a physician.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, he's the editor from hell. He cannot write his way out of a paper bag. In fact, I wrote his paper for him. He was in Yale and I was at Boston College, and I'd write his papers for him. And I remember I was so insulted because he was in a course that was a feminist seminar. Wow. And his first name is Anton, and the professor thought it was a girl.
Really?
So this big 6'2" hunk walks in this class with 5 other feminist women. So I wrote the paper for him, and I was so insulted. I got a B+, calling me insensitive.
Really?
Yes, I'll never forget that. I got that. So if he had written it, I wonder what would have happened. I don't know.
Do you think you would have gotten a higher grade if he was a woman?
Yeah, no doubt.
That was the takeaway I had.
Yeah, no doubt in my mind. Yeah. So he can't write his way out of a paper bag, but he's a great editor. He has the ability to get all those little loose threads and make sure they're going to work out, you know.
That's important. I know that, my book that's coming out is a historical fiction mystery. And what you described is exactly the process I went through. That as I got toward the end of the book, I looked back and said, did I put enough red herrings in? Did I tie all the plot points together for the detective? And I had to go back and add and rewrite until it got to the point where it made sense, if you will. I know, interesting.
And then do you have an independent person read it?
Yes, my agents were constantly reading all the revisions.
Oh, that's great. I've never used Robert in that way, ever.
The agents that I have, they're with the Seymour agency, Nicole, who owns it, and Julie.
Yeah.
They're very proactive in that regard. And one of the things I've learned being a publisher and dealing with so many different agents with so many different authors is that every agent has their own style and is good at something where others are good at other things. And it's really what the simpatico is, if you will, between the author and the agent.
Well, and every author, every agent has to adapt to every author because they have different needs. For example, right. I would not even consider sending them my work because they're not the ones paying me for it.
Right.
I mean, come on, so, but you're right. They have to be extraordinarily adaptable or they're not going to work. They're not going to last.
So I understand that you have a pretty rigorous writing routine. You get up at the break of dawn and start writing and cut off.
That sounds good. Yeah, right, Rick. Yeah, right.
No?
I'm at the computer by 7:30 and I'm doing social media and emails and stuff. I post every single day. I have a wonderful community of people. And since we hike every day, since the start of COVID, and we just continue it,
right.
I post a different picture every day on Instagram and Facebook. So then at 8 o'clock, I'm at my desk and I work until about 10:30 and break and then work from 12 to 1. And then my perfect, marvelous, love you, other half, assistant Karen, whom you've spoken to.
Yes.
We'll have business to do, we'll do this and that and the other. So that's it every day.
So how many words a day do you think you spew out, if you will, or that you write? Do you have a goal or do you just go until you go, okay, that was enough for today?
It depends because the last week I've been editing.
Okay.
And when I start writing again, I try to shoot for maybe 6 or 7 pages. But I really don't count. I just do what I want to do and I don't, that's it. I just do what I want to do and I stop when I want to stop.
Do you ever get writer's block?
I do not believe in writer's block.
Okay, explain that.
this so-called writer's block happened to me once, many years ago. And I realized that it wasn't writer's block. It was a bad plot.
Okay.
I'd written 84 pages. I threw it out because it's much easier to say, oh, I've got writer's block. I've got to go sit down and drink some cocoa and then, you know, blah, oh, shut up. That's really a cop out to me, because you have to think about this. Now, why aren't I writing? You're not writing because the characters will not move forward with your idea. So
Right.
get rid of it. And the toughest thing for anybody to do when this happens is to say, okay, it's a bad plot. And they've got to trust that another plot's going to come out of the parking lot in your brain. And if you don't believe that's true, hang it up.
Got it.
But of course it does. If you're a writer, you will write and another plot will come forward. It happened once, as I said. And so no, there's no such thing as writer's block. It's used, I think, to cover a multitude of rationalizations. Boy, that sounds tough. I don't know. Boy, I'm being awfully firm about that. Maybe I should just shut up.
I don't think so. No. So you had mentioned earlier, you know, and rightfully, about how many books are published a year. And I was wondering if you had any either opinions about or advice for people who self-publish.
Well, you've got to learn all that stuff on how to do it. And I really wanted to, I'll never forget, this was probably about 10 years ago. I wanted to publish the couple of books that I had managed to get back from the publisher because they weren't in print. And I was so excited because I wanted to post them on this wonderful thing called Kindle. And I was so excited. Somebody ratted me out. And so the publisher calls and says, Catherine, we understand. No, we'd like to buy them, please. We'll take care of it. Do you know? And I asked Robert, I said, what would you do? And he says, oh, sell it to him. Who cares? But I had really wanted to do it myself. And do you know what? It probably takes them an hour with no overhead to upload a frigging book to make it an ebook.
Yeah.
It took them a year to bring it out.
Really?
Yes. And I said, you paid this money and you take a year over a half-day job. I mean, here's the book. You have it already. It would take an hour. Anyway. So what were we talking about?
About self-publishing.
So you have to know what to do, and you have to decide whether or not you want to go to Amazon, their publishing house. They're very difficult. They're also very good. They also can do anything they want to with your material without asking you. They can also change things up on you without asking you. So there are pros and cons. So you have to decide if that's for you or not, or you can do it entirely on your own platform. But you have to know, you have to be like born with technology under your arm. You have to be very familiar with it. I could not do it by myself, but a lot of people could. And I say, go for it. Go for it. There are all sorts of platforms. It's going to cost money. You know, you're going to get out of it probably spending about $5,000, and that will include things like certain keywords that they'll make sure show up sooner and more prominent, this kind of thing. It's not a wuss's game. It really isn't. But if you really want to do it, say you've been turned down in print publishing, then why not? This represents a lot of hours of your life. It gives you pleasure. Put it out there and see what happens to it. Who cares? You know, I'm all for it. And there are so many more opportunities today for authors than there were in the era when I operated. Well, I was actually in the golden age of publishing. Actually, this is very different. This is very different today.
Yeah, today I think the single biggest problem is there are so many books being released that getting attention to any one book is a monumental task, especially when you don't have a publisher trying to accelerate that process and make it happen.
Now, I don't know what you mean exactly.
Well, if you're self-publishing a book, all of the marketing onus is on you. So how do you get people to know your book even exists?
Well, this is where you have to take the matters into your own hand, and everything is on the internet. So the first thing you do is you start getting together a following. People, this is not rocket science. You start a Facebook, a fan page, a reader page, I call it, and you post every day. You don't say, well, I guess I better go do that. It's going to come. No, 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 no. You have to set things that are maintenance, that are done every day, every other day. You start your presence on social media. Come on.
Yep.
Because if you visit all the bookstores, you might visit one in your area, since there aren't any, so you really have to, when you're responsible, you start with social media. Do you know that I've never been to our family Facebook page ever? I have no interest.
Really?
But yeah, but the fan page is, that's home.
Cool. So is there a book that you've written that stands in your mind above all the others you've written as either your favorite or the one you're most proud of, or, just a unique story associated with it?
Beyond Eden.
Okay.
It's the title of the book. It's a standalone. I wrote it in 1992, something like that. So it's very, very old. It's nearly 30 years old. It's by far my favorite. And people, you can still get it, of course.
Right.
And people will ask me, can I recommend any books? I said, yes, this is my own personal favorite. And they 100%, they write back and say, I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. It was very wrenching, but I loved it. So yes, not a problem.
Can you give me a synopsis of what the story is?
The story is about a young girl who is raped by her sister's husband.
Okay.
And she is despised by her father, who is a big-time judge in San Francisco and treats her horribly. And basically, her older sister is the one that gets all of his love. It's how she goes. It's how she has to work through all of this, all the things that happen. She becomes a model in New York. And then the guy who does her bookings is threatened. And then just about 90% of my historical romances have mysteries in them, because my brain works that way. Right. And you understand that. They all have. So we have the mystery in there. There are actually, there's a double mystery that works out very well, that dovetails. And you're very fond of her. You're rooting for her all the way through. And the guy is just a mensch. He's a mensch. He's like, if there's one perfect person on the world for her, he's the one. So it's a very, the ending, some people, no, the ending is perfect. Ending is perfect.
Cool. So before I ask you for the last thing of your tips for an author, an aspiring author, one thing I think I'm right about is I think you and I share one particular trait in common, and that is I think we're both known by our middle names.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Richard is my middle name. I go by Rick. Mm-hmm. Catherine's your middle name. When and why did you change to your middle name from your first given name?
Way, way back when I first got, before I got published, the new editor said, well, what's your name? Because that's one thing I will always respect her for, is she didn't automatically assign a pen name, which has so many complications we don't even want to go.
Yes.
So she wanted to use my real name. And I told her my husband's name, which is Hungarian. And she says, well, that's really not going to work for Regency England. And so then it just came out that, so my name, Coulter, is my maiden name. And Catherine, so Catherine Coulter, it sounds so pretty, it sounds fake, but it's not, and it's mine legally, it's my legal name. So everything worked out.
Great. So expand a bit though on pen names, because I see people online debating, aspiring authors, whether to use pen names or not. Some of them want anonymity, others don't. Others think if you write in one genre, you need to have a different name in another. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, for example, a very dear friend of mine, Jane Ann Krantz, I'll never forget, she and I were arguing over it. She said, I'm just stuck. So I'm going to make up another name. And I was fighting with her. I said, no, don't ever give up. But she did anyway, and it took off. I was dead wrong. This was the Amanda Quick name.
Oh, okay.
That took off, just took off. And I would say if you want anonymity, then it's not even a question. I think legally, if you're self-publishing, you can do whatever the hell you want.
Right.
You know, but if you're with a print publisher, they are going to own a made-up, if they approve a made-up name, they're going to own it.
Okay.
A very dear friend of mine, Linda Howard, that was a pen name. It was Howington, but they said, no, let's do Howard. She had to bribe her way out of getting able to use her own name, because what she wanted to do was not have an agent, but write her own books, and then she'd sell her books, which she did. But she had to promise them so many books before they would allow her out of it. So that's an example. If you're publishing your own book, if you want to be, you know, jalapeno red pepper, go for it. Go for it. It doesn't matter. But you really got to think about it. I think if I were with a print house, what the editor, that original editor, did was allow me to figure out and use what I would own. And that's wonderful. I'd love to. I think even if I were self-published, I'd want to have my name on it. Now, if my name were really idiotic, you know, I mean, you've heard some of these idiotic names. Maybe people don't agree, but anyway, but you can, you know, how about a mother's name, a maiden name? You know, you can always find a name that still people will know it's you. That's.
Well, even though you have somewhat mystery, even running through your historical romances, they're still different than the suspense thrillers. And a lot of authors are concerned that if they're writing in two genres, it will be confusing to their readers if they use the same name, but it apparently hasn't affected you in the least.
By the time, no, it hasn't. And that is, by the time I started writing contemporaries, I was well enough established so that it did not matter.
Right.
So but if you're right at the beginning, or Jane Ann had a specific reason for doing this, but for identifying the other name. And in fact, she would have one house with one name and another house with her name. And it worked out quite well.
Great. So what do you have as a final piece of advice or tip or anything for aspiring writers, and that you think would be helpful to them?
Can I do two?
You can do two, absolutely.
Okay. The first one, every writer, I don't care what your genre is, you buy the original 1912 Strunk and White Elements of Style. They've revised it, forget it, you want the original. Memorize it, it's not very long. Memorize it, it is gold, it is pure gold. And the second thing, which you must do no matter what you want to accomplish in life, if you don't do this, hang it up. You know, you got a hobby, you're not a professional. And that is, you have got to be disciplined. You sit your butt in that chair and you work. I don't care if you write crap, it doesn't matter. You have something. I've never been able to edit a blank page. You have to get stuff on a page so that your brain goes to work on it. You know what I'm talking about. And then your brain does go to work, but it has to be on the page first. So you sit your butt down in that chair and you set the number of hours that you want to work, and you set those and you stick to that time, and you do it every single day of the week. I take the weekends off.
Well, that's sort of the difference between a professional author whose career is writing versus a casual author who writes a book And
It's a hobby. It's a hobby.
hobby. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not your profession. It's a hobby, and that's fine and dandy. But
Yep.
just don't call yourself a writer when it's a hobby. Don't do that. Like these critique groups that get together and somebody brings the same chapter 5 years.
Right.
Come on, go away. Talk about a waste of time.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. You're charming. I mean, I didn't expect that you would be anything but you.
well, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's funny because I was thinking of you as being like 24 years old, and I was going to have to mollycoddle you, So this has been a very pleasant surprise with a sexy hat. What else can
Well,
you?
thank you. Well, I think we're of the same generation.
Older than dirt.
Yes, exactly. Well, Catherine, thank you very much for doing this. And I really appreciate it. And I think people will really enjoy watching this.
All right. Then I have a favor to ask, because you've probably already done it, but I don't remember. You need to email me and give me exactly what to put on Facebook so people can come and see it.
I will do that. It'll take me about a week or so to edit it up. And once I have it set and it's ready to go on the YouTube channel, I will get that to you and you can do that. And that would be great, because the more people that watch it, the better.
Great. A pleasure to meet you on the Zoom.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Bye-bye, Rick.
Bye-bye.